They need more of you. They need more of your presence. They need more of just feeling you, like feeling, like actually feeling that you are open, you are available. They can feel your heart. They can feel your soul. They can feel your mind. They can feel your sexuality, like allowing yourself to open to a woman in a way that she can feel you.
All right. Rising Man family, I've got another amazing guest joining me here today. Sarrah Rose, coming in live from Manhattan, the Big Apple. How you doing, Sarrah?
I'm doing well. I'm here with all the sounds of sirens and honking and all the trash trucks driving by. So they're all joining me today.
Yes, familiar sounds. Now, are you a native East Coaster? Where'd you grow up and spend your time growing up?
I grew up in Phoenix, but my grandmother actually grew up in New Jersey, and my family is Italian, so have that strong sense of that Italian Northeasterner. So in a way, it is coming home, even though I didn't actually grow up here.
Yeah, my radar was up for that because every time I have a guest on here who's got some sort of New Jersey, New York, Italian connection, it pulls the Jersey out of me. That's my dirty little secret is I grew up in New Jersey, and by the time we finish this episode, I'm sure my accent's going to be coming out in full force. So don't be alarmed if that's the case.
All right. You grew up in Jersey and Jersey boy. I love the Jersey boys.
Yeah. I'll tell you a quick story. When I was in graduate school and I traveled out to do an internship, I was studying to be a physical therapist. I went out to Shiprock, New Mexico, and it was on the Dene Reservation. And when I told people that I was from New Jersey, at this point in my life, I had long hair and the way that I looked, people were like, wait a second, you don't look like the Jersey Shore. Like what? Like what's wrong? There's like it didn't compute because that's all their reference for New Jersey was. So I'm not that kind of Jersey boy, at least not anymore. I used to be.
I'm currently dating a Jersey boy. He's not that type either. So
yeah, that's a whole nother kind of podcast episode. We'll steer clear of the Jersey boy conversations, but you do have quite the resume, which obviously people who are listening will hear in the intro to this episode. But I'm just curious so if you could briefly walk us through a timeline of how you've gotten to this point of your life where you are coaching and mentoring men in how to have the best sex and relationship life that they possibly can. How did you find yourself there?
Yeah. So I actually got married really young. I was raised evangelical Christian. My dad is a pastor of a church, and I wasn't really the type that rebelled, but it was something that I was indoctrinated into, and I wanted out of Arizona. Like I had full scholarships to all these schools in Arizona for college. And I was like, no, like I want out of here. I didn't want to just, have the same life that everyone that I knew my entire life was going to continue to have. And I was like, I'm moving to New York to model just for this summer, and then I'll come back and go to college. And I just never went back. And so I moved to New York. I was 17 when I moved here. I was at FIT, the Fashion Institute, and I actually started yoga at the Fashion Institute. And it became something I continued on throughout for a decade. And from yoga is how I eventually got into Tantra. So Christianity very quickly became something that no longer resonated for me when I was like living in Manhattan and faced with the reality of how many different people exist on this planet of different cultures and religions and, ethnicities and races and everything. And it was like, oh, wait, like all these people are going to hell. Oh my goodness. Okay. So
hopefully hell has a lot of real estate.
Yeah. Right. I was like, damn, something's off here. And so it's one thing to believe that, like when you're literally, that's your entire world is the church, which is what my upbringing pretty much was. And then another to actually believe that when you see everything else that is happening. So Christianity wasn't for me. I started exploring different spiritual traditions and paths and did a lot of personal development over the years. I got divorced. I went to India and trained in Tantra to become certified as a teacher. And when I got back from India, I met somebody who was in the same lineage as I was, and he and I had a relationship for a couple of years where we were exploring Tantra and Tantric sex together. And then when he and I ended our relationship, it was like, okay, now what do I do? Like, this guy isn't just a dime a dozen, you know what I mean? It's not like every other dude on Hinge has like these same tantric credentials. And so I was like, oh shit, I guess I better start teaching. And I got to create a world where there's plenty of these men, because it was really just coming up with a solution to my own problem. So very
let me pause you there for just a second, because it's really fascinating to me personally. Because I imagine all these tools, the skill set that you're developed for yourself at this stage of your life, and you're looking for a partner that can be on that level with you. That must have been frustrating, I imagine, kind of going through different relationships and different sexual encounters where people, or let's say the men that you were with, didn't have this, I guess, skill set or even knowledge. I mean, how many guys, you say the word Tantra and they're like, what are you talking about? So what was that experience like?
It sucked. I was like back to bad sex after finally, getting away from bad sex, having amazing, incredible sex, like every fucking day, epic sex, and then back to bad sex. And I was like, okay, so I decided I was going to start teaching, but what I also did was I spent a lot of time developing my own tantric practice. So, I had done all this training around tantra that was on my own. And then I had this 2-year relationship. And then I went back to like really cultivating my own personal practice. So that way I wasn't reliant on anybody else to provide this for me. And I trained myself to be able to have better sex, no matter who I was having sex with. So
let me pause you there for a second. Because if you figured that out, then how did you end up working with men? Because at that point, if I'm thinking logically, so many women complain about not having fulfilling sex with their partners. So did you do some work with women too, and teaching them how to have better sex regardless of who the partner is?
I have worked with women. So what I find with women, a lot of it is training our bodies to be able to experience more pleasure, to expand the pleasure, to get out of our heads, to heal trauma, to heal conditioning around our sexuality that we have. Like our bodies can literally be trained to be multi-orgasmic. And so while sex with somebody who's really good in bed, that understands tantra, that gets all this stuff, is still going to be a lot better than with somebody that doesn't. I can still, because of my body's natural response now, because of how much I've trained it in sex, then I can still have good experiences when somebody isn't trained at the same level.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Wow. Fascinating. So I didn't mean to interrupt your story. So no, then okay. Catch us all the way up to how you got to specializing in working with men.
So I actually started out working with women, and the women that I worked with, they were like, Sarah, please help the men. Like, they were really asking me to do this. And, I had my own personal circumstances around it. And I was like, all right, I can do that. If no one else but me, like, okay. So just went for it and took my company online in 2017. I had been just teaching locally in Austin before that. 2017 is when I went online, and I was totally pandemic proof. Like, everything was all set, ready to go. I was already, had clients around the world at that point, and I just have been growing and expanding and helping lots of people. I helped so many people that are in sexless relationships, sexless marriages, have really incredible sex.
Amazing. Well, I recently had a conversation with a man named Taylor Johnson. I don't know if you know Taylor down in Asheville, North Carolina, but he does some incredible work. I would say he's one of those guys who just got onto social media and started talking about sex and being really open about his sexuality, and has evolved into what he considers himself to be as a sex educator and someone who's normalizing the conversation of our sexuality. And one of the things we spoke about was how, especially amongst men, even men in rooms with other men, that we don't really go into depth about our sexuality. And that's a really interesting thing to me, just how guarded, there's the stereotypical locker room talk of guys talking about, yeah, I slept with so-and-so. Yeah, it was so hot, whatever. But as far as going into detail, and especially going into detail about our insecurities sexually or our negative experiences sexually, it's not something that men do. I imagine it's not something that men ordinarily do with women or partners, but it's also not something we do with each other. So I'm wondering what has it been like for you in a position where obviously men need to be open about their experiences in order to get help from you, to get men to open up? Is there like a process to getting men more comfortable speaking about this, or the guys who come your way are already like ready to talk about it?
They're definitely very, it's difficult, exactly like you said, it's not that something that is the norm, especially for men. And so it's a very sensitive topic for a lot of guys. And, many times they're coming to work with me from a place of a lot of pain, like there's something that they're really struggling with. And so, they're coming for help. And, but one of the things that I pride myself most on is actually my community. So my men's group coaching program is called Man on Fire. And this community of men is so fucking incredible. And they are so vulnerable, and they are doing the deep healing work, and they're supporting each other. And that's what's really cool, is to see men support each other in this way. There's no ego. It's nobody is, like trying to show off, or we celebrate our wins because I want them to feel like excited and to share like the positive things, but it's not coming from a place of ego. It's coming from a place of celebration.
That's such a great insight. And I find that even outside of the topic of sexuality, it's one of the things that men do best. There's so much that's spoken about the implicit competitiveness of men that I think is instinctual and probably even biological. But when we really get down to it, we want each other to win. It's one of the things that we're hardwired to do. We want to be a part of a community. We want to be a part of a team. And so to orchestrate and create a community that's really centered around uplifting each other is so powerful. And when men really tap into it, it's exactly like you said. That's been my experience. So that's amazing. I'm sure that's one of the most essential components that lets what you're doing continue to work and grow.
Yeah, I used to train in Brazilian jiu-jitsu. I quit because of the pandemic. But when I was training, and it's exactly like you said, so we're all there on the same team together, and it's a largely male-dominated sport. So there are many times I was the only female, or maybe there was one or two others, and the rest are men. And, so seeing men in that dynamic where like, yeah, when you're rolling, you're training together, you are competing, but you're really all on the same team, and you're all rooting for each other as well. And it's like, yeah, I'm going to compete with you because that makes you better. I'm not competing with you because I want to bring you down. It makes me better, and it makes you better when we fight hard.
Yeah, I love that. Competing to make each other better, not competing to make the other person lose. This is a really important distinction to be made there. Wonderful. Well, so we got some background. Thank you for sharing so much of that. It definitely gives more context to your expertise and just the journey you've been on. I asked this question of everybody on the show who comes here, whether it's a man or a woman, and that is, what does it mean to be a man, in your opinion?
Ooh, I love that question. The work that I do with men helps them answer that for themselves. It's a very unique journey that every man has. And it comes down to just this core truth that we all have that is beneath conditioning. And once we get below that conditioning, we really find our core essence, our core power. I feel like both men and women, our sexuality is the core essence of who we are. Like that is what we came from. It's what we create from. It's how we continue through procreation. That's how we continue in the world. It's how, our species continues, how our own genes continue. So our sexuality is really integral to who we are. So for a man to really know his sexuality, to own his sexuality, to be so confident and powerful in it, that I see every single day how it helps men become the man that they're truly destined to be.
That's amazing. It actually reflects something that I think is a really good topic to pivot into, because this idea, and I don't know if this is just core to Tantra or if this is sex experts like yourself, if this is just your orientation around the world, but I've heard people say this before, that sexuality is our essence. It's where we come from. It's the creative energy in living color right in front of us. But even when I hear that, and I consider myself a pretty open person, even when I hear that, there's an incongruency, almost like an old belief system that is still wants to challenge that and doesn't understand a world where sexuality is at the core of life. So I wonder if you could just speak to that a little bit more. When you say sexuality is our essence, it's the root, the origin. What does that really mean to you?
Yeah, so that is Tantric philosophy, that's our life force energy. Kundalini energy is what it's referred to as in Tantra. And it is the idea that at the base of the spine, we have like this dormant energy that needs to be awakened. And through Tantric practices, we awaken this life force energy, and it travels up the spine to the top of the head, and it creates this congruency, this integration throughout the entire body. So it's this, everything in Tantra is considered sacred. So our sexuality is sacred, our primal root earthy nature of just survival and procreation, that is sacred. Our hearts are sacred. The wisdom of our voice is sacred. So everything the whole way up is all valid. Everything has its purpose and its place, and nothing is higher or lower or worse, better than anything else.
Okay, great. Let's build on that, because I think that's really important, especially obviously compared to the 1970s. I would say that our society is much less sexually repressed than we have been, but I'm sure you'd agree that we're still largely sexually repressed, right? We see it more. There's more skin being shown on Instagram and in magazines, et cetera. But still, there's a lot of stigma and taboo around sexuality as a society in general. So when it comes to reorienting ourselves, where sexuality is one of these core pillars of our humanity, where do we begin with that, or where do we go from where we are now?
Yeah, it's a healing process. There's a lot of wounding around our sexuality, and that's why it's so repressed. And the repression of sexuality creates wounding. And so, we've been in this patriarchal society of sexual control for the last 10,000 years. And yes, we're making progress, but there's so much healing that needs to be done. And that's where I see that we can make the most progress is healing. And, it's why I'm so passionate about what I do. All of the sexual abuse that happens, the sex trafficking that happens, the molestation, the rapes, these things would not be happening if we didn't have such pain around sexuality. Repressed sexuality creates this deep, dark shadow, and it is showing up in society the way that it shows up. And the more people that step into the light, that by doing their healing work around it, the more we will have that become the dominant force.
I love that. And you brought it up before I could, that the historically, how sexuality has been held, and the consequences that have happened from the way we've held that, like you mentioned, with sex trafficking and sexual abuse, the Me Too movement exposing so much of this abuse that's been happening behind closed doors. And my experience of it, especially as a man who identifies as male, is that there's been like this moving target when it comes to okay and not okay, when it comes to how I express myself sexually. And I know that this is true for other men because I'm in a lot of conversations with other men about this, almost to the point where we don't know what is okay and what's not, or what women or sexual partners are looking for from us or not. Because in one conversation, there might be a woman who says, I want you to dominate me and take me and ravish me. And I hear that as a man. I'm like, okay, well, I can do that. I can work on being that man. But then there's the other side of me that says, well, wait a second. I also know that there's women out there who feel really unsafe, who are not okay, that might trigger a massive trauma for them. And also realistically might result in some massive consequences for me as a man when I'm just trying to have a sexual conversation with somebody. So I think it's what I'm saying is it's created a lot of confusion for men. And I'm sure I'm not the only one to understand, well, how do I express myself authentically in a sexual manner, but also be a stand for the safety of the women that I'm with and just women in general. It's like this moving target that is hard to identify.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's why conversations, communication is really important. Always having consent with people that you are with. I do find that women want to be desired. Like even women that I've worked with that have a lot of sexual trauma that they've, worked through to heal. They don't want to be seen as someone that is broken. They want to be seen as a woman that is desired. And there's so much healing that a woman can go through just by being with a man that is very present, that is open-hearted, and you can still ravish her. You can still be the one that is like very dominant in that situation. It doesn't mean that you have to always be dominant, during sex. Like maybe there's times when you're not, but to be able to tap into that part of you, even if you don't express it, a woman can feel that. So that's one aspect that I do work with men on, is that like that feeling inside, that charge, that power that is there. It doesn't mean you have to walk through the world like, oh, I'm this fucking dominant man. A woman can just feel that power within you, and that feels really attractive.
So if I hear you correctly, it's not something that needs to be overcompensated for or over articulated or expressed. If it's something that you genuinely feel inside, that because I know that feeling you're describing, that feeling of confidence, that feeling of certainty. I know who I am. Therefore, I know how I'm moving and operating in my world. That is just implicitly attractive to women. I don't have to try to over articulate that. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. I mean, the guys that walk around with a big ego and like, oh, I'm a dominant man. It's like, oh, fuck you. Like, you're not. Come take my course. Well, let's work on that ego.
Well, that's a really great insight. And I think more often than not, a lot of the guys that I meet, underneath all of that is just a guy with his insecurities, whether he's afraid of rejection or genuinely just wanting to please his sexual partners and not knowing how, not knowing if he is. I think there's also just this deep desire in men to just be of service that we, and sometimes it gets overexpressed in this people pleaser, right? I just want to make my partner happy. The most important thing is to make my partner happy, especially in the bedroom. And when we were getting you signed up for the podcast, one of the things you wrote in the submission was kicking passive permission asking. And I read that and I was like, oh, damn. That sounds like something I need to learn some more about. So first of all, let's just define what passive permission asking is and how you support men with that.
Yeah. So passive permission asking is this default that so many people have, both men and women, when it comes to asking permission for what they really desire in life, for what they really want in life. And our sexuality tends to be one of the biggest areas where this shows up, because our intimate relationships, most closely mimic the relationship that we have with our caregivers. So usually mom or dad. And so all of that insecure little boy, little girl stuff shows up really big in our relationships. And it's like, okay, I have to ask mom if I can go to the bathroom. I have to ask mom if I can have a snack. I have to ask mom if it's cold outside. And we bring that stuff to a relationship. And when it comes to sex, it shows up even bigger than in any other area of the relationship, where it's like, okay, I have these needs, I have these desires, but I'm so afraid to express them. What if my wife, who's kind of in a way surrogate mom now, what if she gets mad because I say this? And so there's this passive permission asking that men adopt. Women do it as well, but I primarily work with men, and so it's this thing of like not being confident enough to just go for what you want. Go, like, your sexual desires are important, just as important as needing to go to the bathroom. And if you're having to always ask and you're tippy-toeing around the subject, you're never going to have what you want. And a woman, she wants to feel your desire. She wants to feel that you're confident in this area. And I'm not saying like you are unconsensual by any means, but know who you are and don't be afraid to say what you want and to claim what you really desire to have in this life. Like, that is sexy as fuck.
Mm-hmm. And it's good to hear that. I'm sure there's a lot of guys out there just like me right now who needs to hear that, because I know that historically and even currently, I'll be straight up. There's a part of me that is like, well, and I'm just, for context for you, I'm married 7.5 years, got a beautiful relationship with my wife. Never been more sexually satisfied in any relationship. So in spite of all of that, I definitely feel that there's still a shyness in me to really ask for what I would desire sexually. And the feelings that come up are, what if that's not something she wants to do? We're married. We're in it for the long haul. Like, what if that's not something she's into? What if that's something that disgusts her or turns her off, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm sure that other men have those thoughts and resistances to that as well. So what would you say to someone like me or another man in that position?
Yeah, a lot of men, that is their biggest fear, is a fear of rejection or a fear of being made fun of for something. And so this again comes back to confidence and just knowing that it's going to be okay if she says no. It's going to be okay if it turns her off. It's going to be okay if you're rejected. Like, what is the worst that could happen? Like, if you feel some sense of shame, or you feel some embarrassment, it's really that is better than not expressing yourself. That's better than not communicating. It's better than shutting yourself down.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. And I definitely know that it's something that it's very much a mental game when it comes to, like you said, what is the worst case scenario? And I think the fear operating underneath more of it is like, especially if it's a man who's in a relationship, a man who's already married and is very committed to his partner. Like, well, what if there's something here that we can't figure out? Like, what if there's something here that is like something she's never going to be into? And I never asked for that because I wasn't confident or didn't want to express that before, or was afraid of what she might think. I think there's that thought process that also comes up. And even if it's a guy not in a marriage, but in a relationship that he cares about, and he's like, ooh, but if I say this thing and then she's not really into it, what if I just ruin the whole relationship? I mean, the reality is, well, if you don't ever say that, then it's always going to be lingering, right? It's always going to linger as that desire that's unspoken, and you'll never know.
Mm-hmm. I don't find that most men have desires that are so extreme that an entire relationship would be ruined by him expressing that one desire. And if that is the case in your relationship, then I would really take a close look at your relationship as a whole, because it seems like there's a lot else going on there that needs to be worked through.
That's really good. Yeah. I think most of the time it's something that's built up to be more than it really is, like most other
It
things.
really is.
So
Yeah,
that's
for
good.
sure.
That's really encouraging. And also I find that it's important to even just be able to build the body to have these conversations. I mean, somebody like yourself, it sounds like you've been practicing this for almost half your life, being in these really honest conversations with people. But let's say there's somebody here who's listening to the podcast for the first time and they're like, whoa, that sounds like something that would be really good for me, but also completely terrifying. I don't even know how to have that conversation without like full body shakes and awkwardness. So what about somebody who's like, okay, I'm on board, but this is new to me. How do I approach those conversations for the first time?
So there's a practice that I give that's a very simple practice, but it's very effective, one of the most effective ones. And it's creating a space where you and your partner are just sitting there together. You can be seated, just like knee to knee, eye to eye, look each other in the eye as you do this. And you set a timer for 2 minutes. And as the man, you can be the first one to ask the question, and you can say to her, what are your deepest desires? And for 2 minutes, you just allow her to speak what her deepest desires are. And you're not murmuring, you're not giving any feedback. You're just there listening, just holding space, just accepting whatever it is that she says. And then you'll switch and she'll do the same for you. And then you move to the next question, which is, what are your deepest fears? And just let her express unfiltered. If at any time she comes to a natural pause, you can just say the question again. What are your deepest fears? And then you switch again and then move on to the last question, which is, what do you love about me? And then you get to go through that together as well. And it's really important that you hold safe space for your partner during this. There's no changing the rules whatsoever. There's no reacting. If something comes up that triggers you, deal with your own emotions. Don't put them on your partner. And we do this a lot in relationships. We make our emotions our partner's responsibility when really they are our responsibility to deal with. And that creates an unsafe space in the relationship. If we feel like we can't express ourselves because everything we do is triggering our partner, then we shut down. And so learning how to take emotional responsibility for yourself, finding ways to care for yourself, to self-soothe, to love yourself, all of that's really going to help. And then having the space where you can just talk, you can just express, and so much healing can come from something as simple as this practice.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that with us, because that's a great exercise to do. And something you said in that last part about taking responsibility for our own emotional experience is huge. Something that we talk about here on the podcast and in all of our messaging in Rising Man quite a bit. And to me, that's a very large topic right there. I mean, we could probably do several podcasts and offer up multiple tools on how to develop that. So I also want to just emphasize that in itself is a skill set, taking responsibility for our own emotional state and learning how to self-regulate our nervous system and our nervous response. So I want to make sure that's not something that's implied as like you could just flip that on. At least that's not been my experience. I don't know if you have some other tactics, but all in all, it feeds into this thing that you shared with me before we started recording about being proactive in developing a healthy sexual life and healthy relationships. That's something that we can actually do. Just like going to the gym and working on our physique, you can also develop ourselves sexually. And I think that's the undertone of this whole conversation, is that something that hasn't been prioritized for one reason or another, especially amongst men. So what does that even look like beyond just having these conversations like you already alluded to? What are some of the other parts of developing a healthy sexuality?
Yeah, and it's really important for men to start doing this. I mean, as early as 25 years of age, if not even sooner than that, developing healthy sexual practices. And this is going to help you have a long, healthy sex life. I mean, many of the men that I work with come in to work with me in their 40s and 50s, and they are really struggling because they did not prioritize their sex lives. I mean, I every day I was seeing seeing guys with erectile dysfunction and porn addiction and delayed ejaculation, premature ejaculation that's coming from, either just too much porn usage, or maybe they are have performance anxiety, things like that. And while they're not insurmountable, like I help a lot of men work through this. If they had been proactive in their 20s and 30s, early 30s, they wouldn't be in the situation they're in now. I'm seeing more and more men come in younger ages, early 30s, even late 20s, struggling with things like erectile dysfunction. And so, ways of having a healthy sex life. Number one, don't watch porn. I'm not against porn for moral reasons. I'm against porn because I see the negative effects that it has on men's sex lives every single day. So it's not worth it. Having a healthy masturbation practice where masturbation is very healthy. Like if you have guilt or shame around that, having somebody help you work through that guilt or shame, and doing it in a really conscious way, like a conscious masturbation practice where you're noticing every single sensation in your body as you're going through it, as you're experiencing this. You're breathing, you're sounding, you're moving your body in conscious ways. I teach men how to have orgasms without ejaculating, how to have multiple orgasms. Like the sexual experiences that men can have are so big, but they've been fed this lie by society that they only have one type of orgasm, which is this, climax ejaculatory orgasm, which, is fine, but it's so small compared to like really what they can experience. So these are some of the ways to go about it.
Wow. Okay. So I'm taking an inventory here. You said, don't watch porn. Number one. Number two, develop a conscious, healthy masturbation practice. Is there anything else on that list of items for men to start considering? Because there's a lot of guys out there who are listening to this that I'm sure are like, whoa, I got some work to do.
Having a strong PC muscle after the age of 25, the PC muscle starts to weaken. That's going to contribute to premature ejaculation as you age. It's something that's really important for being able to control your erections for the long term. Doing penis and testicle massages to keep blood flow to that area of the body, creating a mind-body connection with your penis. A lot of men kind of compartmentalize. So it's like, okay, that's my penis and it's separate from the rest of me, but having more of a holistic approach as to your penis, to your testicles, the anus, the perineum, that it's all part of you, and feeling the power in it, like feeling this energy, this life force energy as a huge part of who you are.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, the last part you said about seeing our penis as like a part of our bodies, not this separate entity and disassociating from that one struck me too. I was like, oh wow, that's something I hadn't really thought of. And yeah, why is that? Why do we disassociate our penis from the rest of our body?
Yeah, I mean, it's part of this conditioning that we have around our sexuality and shame that we have around it, judgments that we have around that part of our body. And it's almost just like, okay, I'd rather not think about it. It's there, it does its thing. And it's just like, kind of shove it off to the side. If I need it, I'll use it.
Yeah, I think it's also one of those things that, because I was thinking about this before recently too, that we like you said, compartmentalization. Sex has been something that has been largely held as, oh, that's something that I do in my bedroom. That's something that I do behind closed doors. It's not like something that I bring. There's a special place for that. And you think about our sexual organs, that those are things that, we often treat the same way. Like, oh, well, I don't talk about that or discuss that or even bring that out unless I'm in this context. So it goes back to what you said before about the roots of tantric practice and tantric philosophy, seeing our sexuality as an integrative part of who we are as humans. And that's probably my biggest takeaway today. I've spoken with, I'm not very well versed in tantra. I'm very fascinated and curious about it. And I've interviewed a couple of people who've come on here and spoken about tantra, but for some reason, this conversation, I'm really seeing that there is merit and value to seeing our sexuality as another pillar in these different facets that make up our humanity, like right along with spirituality and our emotional experience and our mental experience and our physical experience, that it's actually a part of that. It's not a separate thing that we pull out once in a while just to have an experience.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, before I let you go, I do want to ask you a few closing questions. Is there anything else that we didn't address that you want to make sure you share before we start closing up?
Oh my goodness, we could talk and talk and talk forever.
I know. I just opened the door wide open there. How about this?
I think we did. We did really well.
We did. If you, let's say you were going to take everything we talked about today and you were just going to tie it up in 1 to 2 sentences, take home message for the guys listening, what would you say?
Yeah, just be proactive and know you're worth it. Unworthiness is something that shows up a lot in men. And it's this sense of, I am not worthy. There's something inherently wrong with me. My desires are not worthy. And that unworthiness will impact all areas of your life. I specifically deal with sexuality, but it shows up as I'm not worthy to have the relationships I want. I'm not worthy to have the house I want, to have the job I want, all of this. And healing that unworthiness will go a long way.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for your wisdom, Sarrah. I do want to ask you some lightning round questions before you tell us where people can go to find you and work with you and learn more about the amazing community that you're leading. So you ready for the lightning round?
Let's do it.
All right. What is one thing you've learned in your life that you wish you knew when you were 18?
I wish that I had not gotten married to the person I married when I was 18. Anything.
Right on. That's fair. Okay. So what do women need more of from men?
They need more. I feel like this is overdone in a way and kind of the consciousness talk, but it's really true. They need more of you. They need more of your presence. They need more of just feeling you, actually feeling that you are open, you are available. They can feel your heart, they can feel your soul, they can feel your mind, they can feel your sexuality, like allowing yourself to open to a woman in a way that she can feel you.
Beautiful. This might be redundant, but I'll ask it anyway. What is the one message that you have for women or for men about women?
That women want your love. Let's say that. Yeah. Like feeling your love and allowing yourself to love. Love is a very vulnerable state to be in. And many people block themselves and hold themselves back from full, open-hearted love.
Beautiful. And last but not least, where should people go to follow you, to participate in your community? I'm interested, so definitely give us all the details. Where's the best place for people to go and check you out?
Yeah, so my website is tantricactivation.com, Instagram, Tantric Activation, LinkedIn, Sarrah Rose. My podcast is Tantric Activation. Facebook is Tantric Activation. Twitter is I am Sarrah Rose. I'm everywhere.
You're everywhere, and we got all of it. We'll make sure we put it in the show notes. Sarrah, thank you so much for your wisdom and coming on the show today. Truly, I definitely am taking away a lot for myself, and just appreciate the work that you're doing in the world. It's so valuable. It's so needed. And I have a 2-year-old daughter, and when I think about the type of vision that you have for having a world with men who are more connected to their sexuality, and it gives me more confidence for raising a daughter in this world. And it's work that I just don't have access to. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for being a good example to your daughter. It's a big part of why I do what I do.
Mm, wonderful. Well, we'll circle back with you further down the road, and best of luck with everything you're up to.
Awesome. Thanks. You too.